Hello everyone, today we have a different video and this is from the Nakhmanson Gambit. So e4, e5, so king's pawn opening, knight to f3, knight to c6, which is the king's knight's variation. As you can see, we've developed knights from both pairs and you can develop the bishop. And bishop goes to c4, which is the bishop's opening, or the Italian game. So knight to f6, so attacking this pawn, and this pawn needs to be defended somehow. However, we have d4, which is the two knights variation, the open variation. So it causes black to capture in this position, and black goes for it. So e captures on d4, and if we have castles from here, we sacrifice material. Now, if black tries to be greedy and goes for knight captures on e4, you might be thinking we can play rook to e1, and this knight will be pinned down. And then, for example, black would have to play something like this, opening up the pawns. However, we have a better idea, and that is to play knight to c3, which is a very strange move, actually, because you've completely sacrificed this piece, this knight, and now black has a 5-point advantage. So we're simply going to even ignore this pawn and this knight by playing bishop captures on f7. The point is, we're going to invite the king out into the open of the board, and we play knight to d5, so causing a check, and eventually we'll pick up this knight. So there's nothing to do about this, in this position. And if the king moves to e8, so going back in this position, there are multiple squares that the king could go to. The king could go to any of these 4 squares labelled here. So e8 is the most logical move, as you can see it. It's probably the best move, because you go back to your original square rather than staying out into the open like these other squares here. So, in this position, we're not actually going to capture the knight yet. Instead, we're going to pin it down with our rook first, with e1. If we have bishop to e7, we can pick up this knight. And the point is, this king side is looking very, very threatened, as there are lots of attacks of checkmate. So, from here, if d6 happens, trying to eliminate this knight eventually on f3, then we're simply going to play bishop to g5. So it's a material, we're trying to trade down some material here. Even though we're 4 points down, we're just going to ignore this. So if c captures on b2, we're going to ignore this again, and we're going to play rook a to e1. And the point is, in this position, if you look at this position, it's actually a draw in this position, although you're 5 points down. The point is, you've unlocked a much better position, as you have doubled up rooks, which is causing a strong attack on the square. Your bishop's also attacking the square, and your queen is threatening a lot of attacks on the square, and it's an extremely strong position in this position. So going back to rook captures on e4, if we have a move such as h6, for an example, then we can have bishop captures on h6, and if rook captures on h6, then from here we have queen to g8 with checkmate. So going back in the position, the rook can't actually capture here, as you're leaving this 8th rank on the king side undefended. So the bishop must capture, so g captures on h6, and the point is, queen to h5 is a check, and king to f8 is actually forced here. So we're going to play rook to f4 with check, and you might be able to calculate, but there are only 2 other squares that the king can move to instead of, if you don't block with the bishop. So g8, in which you're simply going to play either queen to f7, which is a checkmate, or going back, queen to g6, which is a checkmate. However, if the king goes to this square, it's a checkmate and 1. Queen to f7. So the bishop is forced to block. So now from here, we can have queen to g6. And if c captures on b2, threatening to promote anyhow, then we're simply going to ignore this threat by giving a check. And the point is, the queen has to capture, as there are 2 moves that can happen. If the queen doesn't capture on f6, the king has to go to e7. And after this move, queen to f7 is a checkmate. So going back in the position, the queen is forced to be sacrificed. So now we have a capture on the square, queen capture on f6, and after the king moves to g8, we can either play b1, which we don't really care about, or we can simply just play rook to e1. And now this whole board is unlocked, as you can see. The queen is eyeing down the square. So, say for an example, if a promotion occurs, then we're simply going to capture in this position, and it's a much better position. So we can put the rook back onto e1 eventually after a move such as d6, which is recommended by the engine. We can play rook to e1, and we are with our attack. So after an example move such as bishop to g4, we can get our rook to e4 for an example, attacking this bishop. We could play knight to g5 in this position, sacrificing our knight. We can play queen to g6 with check, which is actually the best move recommended by the engine. So the point is, in this position, after king moves to f8, we can pick up the bishop here, as you can see. We can play queen capture on g4, or we can play knight to g5, sacrificing the knight in this position. But however, we're simply just going to get all our pieces up the board, and there is actually material. The material on the board is equal. However, we actually have a pawn. We actually have one more pawn. So, however, our position is so much stronger as these rooks have no development. This knight is in the middle of nowhere, and this bishop is causing some problems to our knight. However, we have an unlocked rook and a queen around this king, and we have a 38-point advantage in this position. So if we play knight to g5, the engine says that it's a 35-point advantage. So, and the best move recommended for white is bishop to h5, for an example, even though that's just a sacrifice. So from here, you're just completely winning, as you can attack with the knight and it's just a checkmate in 5. So after the rook captures on e5, you sacrifice the rook. The bishop will move back to h5, it's the only other move. Or you just capture with h captures on g5. And after this, you're going to play queen to f6 with check, as you can see. And the point is, if king goes to g8, you're simply going to move rook to g5 with check. The point is, after king moves to h7, it is rook to g7, which is checkmate. Going back, you can also play queen to g6, which is checkmate, or g7, which is checkmate. And this is just a beautiful position here from white. So, hopefully you've enjoyed this video from the Nakhmanson Gambit. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.